Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling a really big and honestly pretty controversial work of history, the Black Book of Communism.
Let's start with a number, 5.5 million. According to the book, that's how many people were held in the Soviet prison and camp system in 1945. Think about that for a second. This is the very same year the Soviets were celebrating victory in World War II, and at the same time, their prison system was holding this staggering number of people.
So, you have to ask, right? How on earth did it get to that point? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack. We'll be digging into the core arguments and the evidence that the Black Book of Communism presents to try and understand the mechanics of the terror it describes.
Okay, let's get right into the heart of it. What's the book's main argument? Its central thesis is that these regimes weren't just authoritarian, which, they were, but that they were, in their very nature, systemically criminal. That's a huge claim.
And they don't mince words about the scale of it all. They call it a tragedy of planetary dimensions. The authors really position this book as the first systematic attempt to actually detail what they refer to as Leninism's crimes, terror, and repression. A huge part of their argument is that for a long time, the sheer magnitude of this tragedy just didn't get the kind of historical attention they feel it deserved.
So here's where things get really interesting and kind of counterintuitive. According to the book, who were the first targets of this terror? It wasn't the old enemies you might expect. No, it argues the state turned on the very groups of people who helped bring the revolution to power in the first place.
And it all happened incredibly fast. The book lays out this timeline that shows a super rapid consolidation of power. You've got the October Revolution, and bam, just a couple of months later, the secret police, the Cheka, is up and running. By 1918, the Red Terror is official policy. And get this, the very groups that helped tear down the old system, factory committees, unions, local councils, or Soviets, they suddenly found themselves in direct opposition to the new Bolshevik state. The book presents the crushing of the Kronstadt Rebellion as this massive, tragic turning point. These were sailors who had been hailed as heroes of the revolution.
So, the crucial question is, how did they maintain that control? How did they enforce their will on such a massive scale? Well, the book argues it came down to a pretty specific and brutal set of tools.
Right at the top of that list was the secret police, which started out as the Cheka. The book makes it crystal clear this wasn't about law and order in any way we'd recognize it. In fact, it quotes Dmitry Kursky, the People's Commissar of Justice at the time, who basically admitted, hey, these aren't normal courts. He called them weapons in a struggle, operating completely outside any normal legal framework.
But it wasn't just about direct violence. The book highlights another tool, one that's arguably even more terrifying: the systematic use of starvation as a weapon. The authors make a pretty bold claim here. They assert that after 1918, you just don't see famines on this kind of massive, politically driven scale anywhere else but in communist countries.
And this quote right here really spells out the method. The idea was to hand out food based on merits and demerits. It's just a recipe for a massive famine, right? According to the authors, this turned a basic human need into an incredible tool of political control. The state literally held the power of life and death over the people.
So, you see, this terror wasn't just some abstract policy. The book argues it had a very real, physical architecture. And that architecture was built from vast, sprawling networks of camps.
The book describes two of these massive systems in particular: the Gulag in the Soviet Union and the Laogai in China. Now, you've probably heard of the Gulag. It's become almost synonymous with Stalin's terror. The Laogai is maybe less famous, but the book explains it began with prisoners from the Chinese Civil War and had this dual purpose. It was about forced labor, for sure, but also explicitly about political re-education. A key point the authors make is just how secret these places were. They were designed to be hidden worlds. In China, for example, the book notes that the most horrific atrocities often didn't happen in the big cities where people might see something. No, they happened quietly, in remote villages, far away from any prying eyes, which, of course, meant they left very few traces behind for future historians to find.
But maybe the most chilling phenomenon the book gets into, the thing that's hardest to wrap your head around, is when this machine of terror turned inward, when it started targeting the party's own most loyal members. The book shares these accounts from dedicated communists who just could not comprehend why the revolution they had served was now consuming them. This quote reflects that profound shock, that disbelief. Even as they were being arrested, many of them remained absolutely convinced of their loyalty to the cause.
And make no mistake, the book argues this was not random at all.
It was systematic. The purges eliminated veteran revolutionaries and foreign communists who had fled to Moscow thinking they'd find safety. We're talking about the leadership of entire national parties, like Poland's, being effectively dismantled.
So, after all of this, what's the big takeaway? Where does the book leave us? Well, it concludes by reflecting on the struggle itself, the struggle to document these events, and just as importantly, to remember them. The final argument presented is that the history of all these events has been obscured, debated, and often just plain ignored. The authors contend that even when the facts started to become undeniable by the middle of the 20th century, there was what they call an ideologically motivated self-deception among sympathizers abroad that made it incredibly difficult to confront the full reality of the situation. And the book opens and closes on this one powerful thought from Tsvetan Todorov, which leaves us with a final, massive question about the role of history. In the face of events that can seem totally incomprehensible, how does the simple act of remembering serve as a defense? Is it maybe our most crucial and perhaps our final defense against their erasure?